Welcome to Module 4 of a framework for understanding poverty. In this one, we look at family structure. Family structure is one of the key issues in poverty. It's a very simple concept, basically this. When there's one wage earner, there's less resources than when there are two. But what we're really going to look at is a larger frame in family structure. How family structure impacts 5 attitudes: cooperation, competition, deception, authority, and identity. You see, family structure is where we first get our conversations and notions about governance and how you get along with people and why you compete. A friend of mine has 3 children. She was so angry at them one day, and she called me and she said, "Ruby, I'd run away, but I'd have to pack for 4. You see, it's our primary human dilemma, how we live with a group of people and still keep our individual freedom. And those constructs and lessons come out of family structure. There's 2 ways to be legally married in the United States. Do you know what they are? Well, the first one is license. The second, licensure. But the second one is common law. Common law means that you've lived together for a period of time, and you now have this relationship that's recognized legally. One of the things that's happening with common law across the United States is a lot of states right now are no longer acknowledging it, and several states legally have not made it a legal arrangement anymore. But it's still widely practiced. And there are 3 characteristics in family structure that you often see in generational poverty that it rarely is in books and rarely is spoken about except around the edges, and has these 3 characteristics. It's common law, single parent, and multiple relationships. Now, if you don't hear anything else I say, please hear me about this. You can be single parent and not have the pattern I'm going to talk about. I'm talking about where all 3 of those things are present, and they impact the 5 characteristics we talked about earlier. As we get started on the example I'm going to give you, I need to ask you these questions. How many of you have students who come to you from households you're not sure who to call? How many of you have students that are angry? How many of you have students that don't respect authority? How many of you have students who don't trust adults? How many of you have students that are very manipulative? Well, now, these can be caused by other reasons than family structure, but family structure is a contributing factor in poverty, and I want to go through this with you. Let me give you an example. This is a woman I know from the neighborhood I studied, and I've known her for 30 years. She's white. She's in her late 50s now. So on a piece of paper, if you will, for me right now, draw a circle. In that circle, put the word mom. That's her. This is her pattern. From that circle, draw a line. And on that line, put husband number 1. She married him, I believe it was common law, when she was 17. The reason I will tell you it's common law is they never got a divorce. They just split. If you draw a second line, that's husband number 2. That was a licensed marriage, and it was a very domestically violent marriage. But they did have a child, and we'll call him, for the purposes of this video, John. Well, they fought a lot. Eventually they split up. He entered into a relationship, if you will draw a line. Wife number 2. It was a 10-year marriage, common law, 10-year licensed marriage. Eventually they split up. But together, they had a child. Now, if you think of John as a half circle between husband number 2 and mom, do you think of the child between husband number 2 and his second wife as a half circle? At this point in time, John has 1 sibling. It's a half sibling. They share the same father. If you will draw a third line, that's husband number 3. Now, this was a common law relationship. They lived together for 8 years. He had a lot of girlfriends. He had 2 licensed marriages. If you take 2 lines and draw it along there, those are his wives. He had children by those. And he and mom had a boy together. So at this point in time, John now has 2 siblings. 1 because they share a mother, 1 because they share a father. He's got 2 half siblings and several step siblings. When his half-sibling, by husband number 3, is 13, he fathers a child with another 13-year-old girl. And for a while, they all live with mom. Then there's a big fight. And they went to live with her mother, then her grandmother, now another man. When John was 17, he dropped out of high school. He entered into a relationship with a girl named Susan. And together they had 2 girls. About 8 years ago, mom left husband number 3. She is right now in an intimate, long-term, live-in relationship with Susan's mother. This is not a comment about sexual orientation. This is about multiple relationships. Let me ask you this question. If you're John and you only had casual register, what specific words would you use at school to try and explain this to somebody? Well, you would use what the kids use. Cousins, uncles, daddies, boyfriends, kind of like an aunt, kind of like a sister, you know. I remember saying to a student one time, he is not your uncle. I didn't really understand what the student was trying to tell me. Well, I couldn't understand in this neighborhood I studied why men disappeared. They'd be home for 3 or 4 weeks, then be gone for 3 or 4 weeks. They'd be home for 3 or 4 weeks, then they'd be gone for 3 or 4 weeks. I asked, what happened to so-and-so? They said, oh, he's off visiting, Ruby. Well, I was so naive. I said, he had to quit his job so he could go visiting? Well, they kind of laughed and made fun of me. I probably would never figured it out if I hadn't read an article in Texas Monthly about how the barrio in San Antonio got started. It got started during the Depression when many men were without work. And they quoted a sociologist who said this: if you want to break a culture, all you have to do is take work away from men, because it changes identity. You see, women always have identity in that they can work and have children, and children are work. But let me tell you what you see happening all the time. You start out as a provider when you have work. You lose your farm, you lose your job. You become a part-time provider. Well, it's hard because you don't have the skills to get another job. The people in your household are working extra hours, so you're lonely. You can't go back to school. You don't have any money. Furthermore, what you do have skills for, there aren't jobs for. You don't really have a way to acquire the skills that you need. And you can't indulge in a hobby. You don't have any money. But you do have 50 cents for a cup of coffee. So what you do is you go into town. You meet somebody. Next thing you know, you're a lover. By second generation, the 2 male identities that are most admired in generational poverty, now they're not the only 2 that are there, but they're the 2 that are admired, are men who are fighters physically or men who are lovers. And what I finally came to understand was this: when you're a fighter or a lover, there's periods of time you have to disappear because people are looking for you. Who's looking for you when you're fighting? The law. Who else? Yeah, whoever you beat up, their cousins, their uncles. Who's looking for you when you're loving? Everybody. That it always makes me a little bit nervous when I come to this part of the country because it's pretty conservative, okay? So loosen up for 5 minutes. We got to talk about this lover business, okay? It won't kill you. All right. How many of you have ever had a fight at school and you had a parent come up to school and say, I want to know what you did to the other kid in that fight? Have you ever had that happen? They want to know if you have favorites. See, when you have more than one husband or one wife, you got favorite spouses, you got favorite children. Like one of the women in the neighborhood said to me, she's talking about her current husband. She said, well, Ruby, it ain't love, but it ain't bad. She went on and explained. I learned a lot. Just let me say an aside here. One of the hidden rules in middle class is you should never, ever share the details of your intimate relationships. You just don't do that. You're allowed to have all the emotional angst you want. You know, you can cry forever, but you don't share details. In generational poverty, it's just the opposite. You share all the details of your intimate relationships. You engage in higher level thinking. You compare, you contrast. You know? But you don't do a bunch of emotional angst. You just talk about how you're going to kill them, okay? Let me tell you this story. I was in this elementary school in San Antonio. A week before I got there, 2 boys in the building had the same father but different mothers. The father came up to school, had lunch with one of the boys, but not the other boy. What do you think happened in the parking lot after school that day? Fight between whom? The mothers. Why were the mothers fighting? Well, they'll tell you they don't like it because of how the boys were treated. But that's not the real issue. They were angry because it was an identity thing. Let me give you an example. If that's his favorite boy, who's his favorite woman? She is, by inference. If that's his favorite woman, who's the better woman? Well, she is, by inference. And that's the reason they fought. That's the same reason girls fight in middle and high school. They're fighting over who the better woman is. Let me give you another example. Did this teen pregnancy conference. There was a question from the audience. We had this 14-year-old girl in our program. She's got a baby by a man who's fathered 12 other children. She's so proud of this baby. We don't understand. I said, hey, it's a trophy baby. It gives her a distinct advantage. They said, well, she's never going to get child support. I said, no. That's not the advantage she wants. You see, you know that man is a lover. How do you know that? Got a lot of children. You know he's going to leave her. He's left the rest. When he leaves her, it'll be much easier for her to get another man in the house. Because that man will bring resources to her. The rumor in the neighborhood is that she's something special because this lover, who's known for that, had a baby with her. It'll be easier for her to get another man, which will bring resources to her household. Let me give you one more example. Let's look at husband number 3. Let's suppose that he got in a fight, and he had a really good reason to get in a fight. But his problem is he doesn't have $1,500 to get out of jail. The law's looking for him. So you know what he's going to do? He's going to run and hide. And when he runs and hides, he's going to quit his job. Why is he going to quit his job? Because if he doesn't, they'll find him at work. And if he can cross the state line, he's going to do that. If he can't do that, he'll go to another city. If he doesn't have the resources for that, he'll go to somebody's house and hide out. One of the reasons they won't open their door sometimes when you do home visit is they're hiding somebody. He's over there for a couple weeks. He's out of money. Can he ask his friends back where he used to live for money? Well, he can, but they don't have any. So what can he do to stay alive till he can come back? Because he knows the law's still looking for him. What are his choices? Well, he can get a job. Number 2, criminal activity. Or number 3, find another woman. But you see, it's going to be very hard to get a job if he doesn't have an address. The fastest way to address is to get a woman. So what he's going to do, he's going to find another woman. And meanwhile, mom's going to find another man. They have a saying in welfare, and it's this. Many uneducated women are one man away from welfare. And that's what they mean. And I'm going to say to you, but for the grace of God, it could be you or me. What does that do to kids? And that's what I want to talk about next. How does it impact the children? Well, the first thing that happens is it promotes mobility. When the man's not in the house, there's less rent money, you move. We know what mobility does to student achievement. And in fact, the research is the less stable a household, the greater the impact the poverty has as well, as it relates to stability. Secondly, it breaks relationships. And relationships are so linked to achievement. The third thing that happens is it promotes abuse. This is distasteful to me, but I need to explain it to you. You're 7 times more likely to be abused if you're in poverty than if you're not. And across all economic levels, regardless of class, 70 to 80% of child abuse is done by people who are not the biological parents. So the more non-blood people you have in and out of the household all the time, the greater the opportunity for abuse. And sometimes, when the mother believes that she doesn't have enough sexual prowess, or there's an addiction issue, or there's a mental illness issue, to keep the man in the house, they'll offer a son or daughter as a sexual companion to the man to keep him there. There are some giveaways in school that is going on. These are the giveaways. Number one, there'll be a change in clothing. They'll either wear lots of clothes to cover up, or they'll be very sexually suggestive clothing. Number two, there's often a shift in weight. Very, very rapid weight gain. I'm talking 50, 60 pounds in a 3-4 month period. The third thing is that they'll often steal. Now, I want to be very careful with this one. You can steal and not be sexually abused. You can be sexually abused and not steal. But in the research, someone took something from you without your permission, you're going to take something from somebody without theirs. The fourth characteristic, they often come with unexplained expensive gifts, and often it's jewelry. And in boys, they often start fires. Now, another way to get money in your household that does not involve a man and has really been impacting schools and has been exacerbated since the 1996 Welfare Reform Act is that you go to school and you get your child identified as 504 or special ed. How many of you have had a parent come in and insist there's something wrong with their child, they need to be tested, and you don't think there's anything wrong, okay? What they want is Social Security Insurance Disability, SSI. And in the neighborhoods, they call them crazy checks. Crazy checks pay much better than welfare. It's about a 4-to-1 ratio. And what you do is this. You go, get your child identified. Then you get the paperwork, which you take to a lawyer, who takes it to a judge. I need to tell you, they're not very successful going through Social Security. There are a lot of lawyers who will take it to a judge, and the lawyers get a part of the monthly take. Do you follow me? And you get your child put on SSI disability. I was in this one school where this second grade boy did so much better. They sent a note home, the teacher did, to the mother telling them the boy was doing better. The next day the boy came to school absolutely berserk. And when they got him calmed down, he said, I got to be crazy. If I'm not crazy, we don't get no money. And let me show you how it shows up at secondary. Before I understood what was going on, I was teaching in Corpus Christi, and I had this sophomore boy walk in, the first day of school. And he walked right up to my desk, and he said, I want to tell you something, miss. I'm not lifting a pencil, and I'm not picking up a piece of paper, so don't even ask me. I said, what's your name? I mean, I didn't even know who he was. He said, Anselmo. I said, Anselmo, why are you coming to school? He said, if I don't come to school, my mom don't get no money. And I came later to understand he got a 504 check, but he believed that he showed he was learning at all, he would lose the money. Do you follow me? There's another rule that I want to talk about. It's a pattern that is in both biology and sociology. In other words, it doesn't matter whether it's human or animal households. The rule is still the same. The more non-blood players you have in and out of a living arrangement, the greater the tendency that relationships between males will be adversarial and relationships between females will be adversarial. And I want to show you how it works. John hated husband number 3. Husband number 3 hated John. Husband number 3 bought his own biological son a car at 14. John got nothing. Husband number 3 would get drunk and beat up mom. Who was expected to break up that fight? John was. When John was 11, he begged his mother. He begged her, leave him. I'll take care of you. His mother said, I can't. You can't. I can't leave him. You can't take care of me. You can't work. So John was left in that setting. He never quite knew what he was going to find. He came home. Sometimes he'd be ignored. Sometimes he'd be talked about. Now, husband number 3 never hit him. But when he talked about him, he no kind of a man, he was a wimp. What did mom do when that was going on? Nothing. John's on his own, she's not going to go up against that man. And if she has to choose between spending time with John or spending time with the man, she's going to spend time with the man. But when the man leaves the house, she wants to make it up to John. So how does she do that? Well, she cooks him his favorite food. Food is equated with love and forgiveness. She trashes the man. She talks bad about him. She gives him extra spending money to John. She is permissive. She might even come up to school, yank your chain just really good, just to let John know she's on his side. If you've ever had a parent-teacher conference and you could not figure out what it was about, chances are that the parent is seeking forgiveness from the child. The thinking is this: you know, I didn't defend you over here in front of this man, and I feel bad about that. So I'm going to go up to school where there's an authority, and I'm going to defend you up there. That way you will know I love you. There's periods of time in here where there's no adult male in that role. In the household, John takes that role, and then he vacillates how he treats his mother. Sometimes he's verbally abusive, sometimes he's supportive. And then he goes to see his biological father. His biological father's heard what's going on in the neighborhood, and he says to John, now he's offering him support, he says about John's mother, which he's already told John, if it weren't for that bee of a woman, I could live with you. He says to John, you don't need to listen to that. She got no power over you. She got no control over you. You do whatever you want to do. Mom's trashing husband number 3. She says to John, hey, you don't need to listen to that SOB. He got no power over you. Got no control over you. You do whatever you want to do. John comes to school. A teacher, administrator, law enforcement officer tells him to do something. What does John say? Now let me ask you this question. If you were John, would you be angry? Would you trust authority? Would you believe adults? Would you think the rules are going to be the same every day? Would you be manipulative? And more importantly, what would school have to offer you that you would find to be of value?